The bright lights of the stage shone like 1,000 suns, but for one young boy standing nervously behind the curtain, they felt like the edge of a dream he never thought he'd reach. The cameras zoomed in, the crowd buzzed with anticipation, and the judges prepared to meet another hopeful contestant. No one in that massive theater could have imagined that in just a few minutes, the entire hall would fall silent, and then explode into tears, standing ovations, and one of the most unforgettable moments in Got Talent history. It all started far away from the glamorous stage of the show, in the crowded streets of Manila, where a 12-year-old boy named Carlo lived with his mother in a small wooden shack by the train tracks. Every morning, he woke up to the sound of horns, vendors shouting, and the rumble of passing trains that made their fragile home shake. His mother, Liza, worked in a small eatery, earning barely enough to keep rice on their plates. His father had left years ago, chasing promises that never came true, leaving only silence and struggle behind. Carlo's only escape from the noise of the streets was music. He didn't have toys, phones, or even proper shoes, but he had a voice. When his mother was too tired to smile, Carlo sang for her. When it rained through the holes in their roof, he hummed softly to drown out the storm. And when hunger made their stomachs ache, music became his way of saying, "It's going to be okay." Every evening, as the city lights flickered on, Carlo would walk to the corner of a busy street where tourists and locals passed by. With a small borrowed guitar that was missing a string, he sang old songs, classics his father used to play from an old radio. The crowd rarely stopped, but sometimes, a kind stranger would toss a few coins into his small box. That was enough for a piece of bread, or sometimes, enough to buy his mother her favorite instant coffee. One night, as Carlo strummed a familiar tune, a man stopped to listen. He wasn't just any man, he was an assistant producer from a television network who had come to Manila scouting local talent. He watched as the boy sang with a voice that carried raw emotion and soul far beyond his years. When Carlo finished the song, the man approached and asked, "Where did you learn to sing like that?" Carlo looked up shyly and said, "From my heart, sir." A week later, Carlo found himself standing in a line of hundreds of contestants for an audition, barefoot, nervous, clutching his guitar like it was part of him. He had never been on a plane, never left his small neighborhood. But now, here he was, in a huge studio with banners that read, "Asia's Got Talent," surrounded by cameras and faces he'd only seen on TV. When it was finally his turn, the stage crew whispered, "You're next." He felt his heart racing. As the big doors opened and the blinding lights hit his eyes, he saw the panel, Simon Cowell, David Foster, Ongun, and Jay Park, waiting. The audience clapped softly, curious about the small boy with messy hair and torn jeans. Simon leaned forward. "Hello, young man, what's your name?" Carlo swallowed hard. "My name is Carlo, sir." "Where are you from?" Simon asked. "From Manila, Philippines." "What are you going to sing today?" Carlo hesitated for a second, then smiled nervously. "Hotel California by the Eagles." The audience murmured in surprise. It was a bold choice, a classic rock song, complex even for adult singers. Simon raised an eyebrow. "Interesting choice. Why that song?" Carlo looked down and whispered, "It was my father's favorite. He used to sing it before he left. When I sing it, I feel like he can hear me." The theater fell silent. Simon nodded gently. "All right, take your time. The stage is yours." Carlo closed his eyes and began to strum. The first chords were soft, trembling, but as his voice filled the air, something magical happened. His tone wasn't polished or trained, it was pure emotion. Every word of the song carried the weight of his story, his pain, and his hope. The audience, at first curious, soon found themselves leaning in, mesmerized. When he sang the line, "You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave," his voice cracked slightly, and tears rolled down his cheeks. The camera zoomed in on Simon, his expression softened, his usual stern look replaced by something rare, compassion. Ongun's eyes glistened, and David Foster pressed his hand to his heart. The song ended in silence. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, a woman in the audience stood up, followed by another, then another, until the entire theater was on its feet. The applause erupted like thunder. Carlo looked confused, almost scared, until Simon stood up slowly, clapping. "That," Simon said, his voice breaking slightly, "was not just a song. That was a story. That was your soul speaking." Carlo tried to smile but burst into tears. The crowd began chanting, "Golden buzzer! Golden buzzer!" Simon turned to his fellow judges. David nodded. Ongun wiped her tears. Simon smiled and said, "Carlo, I don't think we need to say much more." Then he reached forward and slammed his hand down on the golden buzzer. Gold confetti exploded from above, showering the stage. Carlo froze in disbelief as his mother, standing backstage, ran onto the stage crying uncontrollably. Simon walked over and hugged the boy, saying softly, "You just reminded us all why we love music." The moment went viral across the world. Within hours, millions watched the clip online, people from every corner of the globe leaving comments like, "This is the most heartfelt version of Hotel California I've ever heard," and, "That boy's voice brought me to tears." News outlets shared his story, calling him, the street singer who touched the world. But behind the fame, Carlo remained the same humble boy. The show's producers arranged for him and his mother to stay in a hotel for the first time in their lives. Carlo spent hours staring out of the window, amazed by the city lights below. "Mama," he said softly, "do you think Papa saw me?" She smiled through tears. "I think he did, my son. I think the whole world did." As the competition moved forward, Carlo prepared for the semifinals. The pressure was higher, the lights brighter, and the expectations immense. Yet, every time he walked onto that stage, he carried the same simplicity, the same honesty that made everyone fall in love with him. He rehearsed late into the night, sometimes alone, whispering prayers between songs. During rehearsals, Simon often visited him, offering advice. "Don't try to be perfect, Carlo," Simon once said. "You're already real, and that's what people remember." Carlo nodded, holding his small guitar tighter. The semifinal night arrived. The crowd was huge, cameras flashed, banners waved with his name, and his mother sat in the front row, holding her breath. This time, he performed an acoustic version of "You Raise Me Up." The moment he began, tears flowed freely throughout the theater. He sang with such purity and power that by the final note, even the cameramen behind the scenes were wiping their eyes. He advanced to the finals, and as the finale night approached, nerves began to creep in. He was up against older, more experienced performers, dancers, and magicians. He looked at them backstage, intimidated, but then reminded himself of where he came from. "I'm singing for Mama," he whispered. "That's enough." The final night was electric. The hosts introduced him as the little boy from Manila who stole the world's heart. The crowd roared as he walked onto the stage one last time. The judges smiled warmly, knowing they were about to witness something special. He began his final performance, not a famous cover this time, but a song he wrote himself called "My Little Home." The lyrics spoke about love, struggle, dreams, and gratitude. "We had nothing, but I had you," he sang, looking straight at his mother. His voice cracked again, but that only made the moment more powerful. The audience listened in complete silence, some holding tissues, others holding their hearts. When the final note echoed across the theater, there was a pause, a deep, emotional pause, before the explosion of applause and cheers. Simon stood up again, shaking his head in disbelief. "You know, I've been doing this for years," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "and it's not often that I see someone this young, this raw, and this honest. You came here with nothing but a dream, and you gave us everything. You've reminded us that music isn't about fame, it's about feeling." Carlo looked around the room, tears streaming down his face. The golden confetti from his first audition was replaced this time by fireworks and chants of his name. The hosts walked up to him, holding the envelope for the final result. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer said, "the winner of this season is Carlo from the Philippines." The theater erupted. Carlo covered his face in disbelief as his mother ran to hug him. Simon joined them, saying softly, "You deserve this more than anyone." Cameras flashed, the audience screamed, and across the world, millions of hearts swelled with pride for the little boy who came from nothing and touched everyone with his song. In the days that followed, Carlo's life changed forever. He was invited to perform in concerts, appear on television, and even record his first single. But despite all the fame, he never forgot where he came from. He used part of his winnings to rebuild his mother's home and donated the rest to a charity that helped street children in Manila. Months later, in a quiet moment on a rooftop, Carlo sat with his guitar watching the sunset. His mother joined him, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Do you ever miss the old days?" she asked. Carlo smiled softly. "Sometimes, because that's where my dreams began." He looked up at the sky and whispered, "This one's for you, Papa." Then, With his guitar resting on his lap, he began to play Hotel California once more, not for fame, not for applause, but for love. The clip of that rooftop performance was later uploaded online by a fan. Within days, it reached millions again. People said his voice had grown deeper, richer, but still carried the same heart that first made them cry. It became more than a song, it became a symbol of hope for kids who had nothing but dreams. Carlo's journey from the streets of Manila to the world stage became an inspiration for millions. Schools invited him to speak. Foundations named scholarships after him. But he always said the same thing whenever people asked him about his success: "I didn't win because I was the best. I won because I never stopped singing, even when no one was listening." Years later, when a journalist interviewed Simon Cowell about the most unforgettable moments in his career, Simon smiled and said, "There was this boy, maybe 12, from the Philippines. He sang Hotel California. I've seen countless performances, but that one, he reminded us all of the power of music. That was the day I didn't just hear a song. I felt it." And that's how Carlo's voice continued to echo, not just in the studios or on screens, but in the hearts of everyone who believed that dreams, no matter how small, can change the world. The story ends not with applause, but with a quiet guitar playing under the night sky, where a boy once sang on the streets and now sings to the stars. His voice, once drowned by the noise of the city, now carries across oceans. The same song, the same heart, but a whole new world listening. And for those who ever doubt their worth, who think their voice is too small to be heard, Carlo's story is a reminder. Sometimes, the softest voice can make the loudest echo. Sometimes, a poor boy with a broken guitar can teach the world how to feel again. That's the power of music. That's the power of hope. And that's the story of a boy who sang Hotel California and made the world cry.